Hi everyone, very good evening. Welcome to the 10th session of Navigating Net Zero series. We've got a lot of attendees now. We'll wait for another minute or two. It's 4:30 right now. We'll start at 4:32 sharp. While we are waiting for people to join, just as a passing remark, we've done almost about 9 webinars by now. You can visit our website sustainium.io, go to the events page. All the past recordings are there. Uh, this is this will come in handy because we are talking about scope 3. There may be someone who has not seen our earlier webinar or probably is talking about scope 1, 2, 3 for the first time or has just joined as a ESG manager somewhere, for an example. It might come in handy for them. So if they go through our previous webinars, this will make much more sense. All right, it's 4:32. Let's start. We have we have a lot of people now. Okay, great. So welcome again, everyone, to the 10th session of Navigating Net Zero series. Today we are talking about the Scope 3 journey, primarily talking about how we convert uh, the hidden scope emissions into net zero action. We'll talk about the one very prominent case study, and we'll uncover the truth about scope 3. Uh, we have done, as I said earlier, about 8 webinars earlier, 9 in total because we did BRSR twice. Feel free to go to our website and look at all the previous webinars. These are all recorded sessions. With respect to Q&As, I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions. Uh, Probably it's best to put it at the end. We've got both the options, but I prefer to do it at the end because I have tried to make the session in a way that most of your questions will be answered. In case some of them are not answered, then we'll definitely talk about it at the very end. All right. In terms of coverage of content, we'll talk about organizational and operational boundaries. We'll talk about the various challenges in scope 3 emissions. We'll talk about how to address those challenges, and we'll also talk about one case study of a university in India, which is a live project that we are working on. Uh, then we'll also, at the end, we'll talk about how to build a reliable GHG inventory, particularly addressing the scope 3 inventory. All right, let's dive in. So we have seen this earlier, organizational and operational boundary. Organizational boundary, when we talk about what entities to be part of the GHG inventorization activity. That means you have to talk about what are the different entities. It could be group companies, subsidiaries, franchisees, investments, whatnot, right? All of those is where we talk about organizational boundary. Of course, this is not very relevant right now with respect to scope 3, but only when you've sorted the organizational boundary, then you can talk about operational boundary. So what I mean over here is we should definitely have sorted the organizational boundary and then we'll talk about operational boundary. Let's talk about operational boundary. Operational boundary, as we all know, is when we talk about the scope emissions, which is the direct and indirect emissions. And we break it down into scope 1, which is direct emissions, scope 2 and scope 3, which are indirect emissions, and we'll address all of them over here, right? Now, uh, let's talk about the various challenges in scope 3 emissions calculation, right? We'll look at all the challenges that there are, and we'll try to break it down and see if there are any solutions to addressing those. Before we talk about scope 3 challenges, here are all the categories just for your references. There are 15 scope 3 categories as defined under JG protocol. Right now see downstream and upstream with these arrows. So this could be flow of material, flow of energy. This can be either, right? So these are the 15 categories under Scope 3 emissions. Let's talk about the challenges and then we'll uncover each categories, their boundaries, activities, and whatnot, right? So what is the first challenge that we have with respect to Scope 3? In most cases, we have seen that people are not able to select the right scope categories. The first challenge that they have is knowing whether this particular category is applicable to them or not, and thereafter collecting data for those that particular category. So a very common question that we see is upstream versus downstream. People get confused in terms of, for an example, when we talk about transportation. So uh, it's very easy to visualize. In case of transportation, it is very easy to visualize also. Anything that is flowing within the boundary of your company, that is considered as upstream. Anything that is going away from you or away from the boundary of the company, be it products which are manufactured, be it waste which is generated, all of them is downstream. With respect to leased asset, it is a little bit more confusing. In terms of upstream leased asset and downstream leased asset. Downstream, and I'll simplify it. Downstream is when you are leasing it out to someone else. You are the owner of the property. You are leasing it out to someone else on rent. Upstream is when you are the tenant and you have to report it to your owner, right? So that is what upstream and downstream means with respect to leased assets. Another problem is very often we see that the emissions related to scope 2, which is electricity, which is purchased electricity, is considered, is calculated. And in there, we also calculate the transmission and distribution losses. Now, as per GHG protocol, the transmission and distribution losses are not part of scope 2 emissions. These are actually part of scope 3 emissions. They come under fuel and energy related activities, and we'll see how to calculate those. We also have the fuel refining and transportation, and most of the time people miss this out. This is also known as well to tank. Whatever fuel you're burning within your compound, it has been refined, it has been brought down to your premises. There is emissions related to that activity as well, which comes under scope 3 category under fuel and energy related activities. We'll uncover the fuel and energy related activities and we'll see what all categories are there. It's the most extensive one. Uh, then people talk about water consumption and wastewater treatment, right? So quite often people say, okay, water is not a category in GHG protocol. So water is not directly addressed. What you do is in terms of services, you account for it. So in most cases, when water is coming as a supply, so somebody is giving it to you as a service. So that is why it goes under purchase goods and services. In case wastewater treatment is done outside your premises, that is somebody else is doing it, that is when it goes under waste generation in operation, right? So these are some very common questions with respect to placement of the activity within a particular category or selecting the right category of scope 3. Another problem that we have with scope 3 is the complexity in terms of data collection. Quite often, the stakeholder that we are wanting to collect the data from, like for an example, in case of downstream leased asset or upstream leased asset, the stakeholder or the property in this case for probably property manager or a facility manager may or it may not be his top priority, right? However, it is very important with respect to GHG accounting, right? So it's very important to uh, to make the stakeholders understand that this data is very important, right? When we talk about the value chain, the suppliers, contractors, or vendors, some of them will be reluctant in sharing the data. First of all, they may not have the data because They don't have a ESG or sustainability practice in place. Supposedly, they do have something in place. Sometimes they're reluctant because they don't want to share any confidential data, right? Which again will have to go through assurance process for the reporting company. There, then there is the problem of the data access. So in case of the reporting company, scope 1 and scope 2 is directly generated either through an ERP system or through stakeholders which are directly in touch with you. On the other hand, scope 3 is difficult to collect. You're always relying on Excel sheets and emails, and sometimes this data is lost. The data may not be complete. You may not have all the validations in place. Sometimes you will only get the direct emissions related to all the activity, and you'll not know what activity has happened at the supplier or vendor level, right? So it becomes immensely difficult to verify this data, right? This also brings in a problem of continuously monitoring the data. You may get the data in 1 month, you may not get the data in another. Same goes if you're doing annual sorry, annual monitoring. You may get data from some suppliers, you may not get data from some other suppliers. So continuous monitoring is a problem, right? Last but not least, there is the problem of selecting the right emission factors. Of course, this step comes in the moment you've collected the activity data. Um, Now, I'll give you one simple example. Again, this is scope 2, which could be scope 3 for you when somebody else is reporting it, even at their end. Uh, I've In front of you, you've got the grid emissions factor for India. Most of you would already be aware of with some of them. We've got UNFCCC, we've got IEA data, we've got the IGS database, and we've got the Indian CA, which is Central Electricity Authority. You can see the variance over here. It goes from 0.6077 to up to 0.9146, right? So you wouldn't know which one to choose from. Now, GHG protocol says always use the most local one. So here in this case, India CA is something that we should go for. At the same time, when we talk about India CA has started giving you the emission factor, both including renewable energy as well as excluding renewable energy. So there's always this problem of which one to use, right? Another problem with emission factors are, like for an example, we discussed stationary combustion as well as mobile emissions or mobile sources. You are burning the fuel, but you're not accounting for the process before, right? In terms of refining, in terms of transportation. So all of that is something that has to be accounted for. Now, there are specific emission factors available for this, which is known as WTT, which is well to tank, that are available to use for calculation. We'll see one of those in the examples that we have today, right? Now, addressing the scope 3 challenges, let's talk about how we can address it. Let's look at the scope 3 categories, look at first their minimum boundary, and we look at all the activities that are there and what kind of data that we can collect for those scope 3 categories, right? Now, this is we are doing to help you understand and uncover each category and help you try to uh, you know uh, understand the various activities that are there within that particular scope category and what kind of data you should be collecting for those, right? So what we have done is we have grouped similar type of scope 3 categories together. So right now you can see if we've got transportation related categories. We've got downstream and upstream transportation and distribution. We've got employee commuting as well as business travel, right? Now, in case of upstream and downstream transportation and distribution, the boundary is defined as this. It is scope 1 and scope 2 emissions of transportation providers, distributors, and retailers that occur during the use of vehicles and their facilities, right? So the boundary is very well defined with respect to what type of activities should go under this. So it is scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, right? The activity data can be in the form of first the distance covered from gate to transport materials along with the mode of transport. If you've got this information, you can definitely calculate the emissions related to both downstream and upstream transportation, right? Now, someone might question the with distance, will we be able to calculate both scope 1 and scope 2? So the answer to this is whatever emission factor database you will utilize, that will account for both scope 1 as well as scope 2 emissions combined together. So you just use the emission factor, you multiply with the right distance, and you have to see the right transport is selected, and that is how you'll get to the correct emissions calculation for upstream and downstream transportation and distribution. Regarding employee commuting, it is similar. Here we talk about scope 1 and scope 2 emissions of either the employee who's using his own transport, for an example, or the transportation provider that uses their own vehicles. Here, in this case, mostly it'll be scope 1. Scope 2 will be primarily if either of them are using EV vehicles. In that case, that becomes scope 2, right? The activity data here can be in the form of distance traveled from home to office and back, along with the mode of transport or travel. Thereafter, we've got business travel, the minimum boundary again, scope 1 and scope 2 emissions of transportation carriers that occur during the use of vehicles. Right? Activity data again can be in the form of distance traveled. Now, you will see a similar trend over here in most uh, scope 3 categories. It is the scope 1 and scope 2 emission of the value chain. Uh, that can be the service provider, that can be transportation company, that can be waste management company, right? So all of them is something that is considered when calculating scope 3 emissions under different categories. Now, of course, there are some of the categories which are very different, but the scope 1 and scope 2 trend you will see repeating a lot in scope 3 categories. Let's talk about the other two categories, which is purchase goods and services and capital goods. Now, quite often people get confused between purchase goods and capital goods. Purchase goods is something that you buy, uh, for an example, in case of a manufacturing facility, in the form of raw material that you use to make products, then you sell it off, right? So that is considered as purchase goods. Whereas capital goods is when you purchase instrument or machines or anything that you use for your own company. These could be machines that you use for production, for an example. So that is considered as capital goods, right? So in case of purchase goods and services, the minimum boundary is that all upstream, that includes cradle to gate emissions of purchased goods and services. The activity data here can be in the form of description of goods and services along with value of goods and services. Now, this can be one of the approach when you've got the value of the goods and services. There are emission factors out there where you can calculate the emissions just by knowing the value of the service that is provided or the value of good. The other way of doing it is you know the volume or the weight of the goods, and that is how you calculate the emissions related to it. So it depends on the type of emission factor database that you're using, and the type of course, the data that is available to you at first. So you'll have to see what type of data is available, and accordingly, you'll have to calculate the emissions. Similar thing for capital goods. Here, mostly it'll be in the form of volume or weight of the capital good. Then we've got upstream leased assets and downstream leased assets. I think the differentiation is very clear now. Upstream is when you are the lessee, downstream when you're leasing out your properties to someone else, right? Now, again, you see similar trend, scope 1 and scope 2 of the lesser in case of upstream. that occurs during the reporting company's operation of leased assets, right? For downstream, it is the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions of lessees that occur during the operation of leased assets, right? This is for energy use. Again, the activity data here could be scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. So all 5 categories of scope 1, which includes stationary conversion, mobile sources, refrigeration and air conditioning. We've got fire suppression as well as purchase gases. Those are the 5 categories under scope 1. The other scope 2 categories are the purchased electricity and steam. So all the data wherein here we have listed it down: types and quantity of fuel combustion, types of gases used in air conditioning and their leakages, quantity of purchased electricity and steam during the reporting period. So these are the data that you can look for when we talk about upstream and downstream leased assets. Moving on to franchisees and investment, we've got the franchisee and investment. Again, similar trends: scope 1 and scope 2 emissions of the franchisee, uh, that is related to the operation of the franchisee, as well as operation of the leased, of the investments, right? Here again, the data has a similar trend. We don't need to cover it again. Um, Thereafter, we talk about 3 more categories, which I think are one of the most difficult ones to calculate. Um, these categories are applicable not to all the industries. Mostly it is for industries where it is manufactured or product-based industries, service-based industries. These are not applicable to, right? These are purchase of sold products. Again, scope and 1 and scope 2 of emissions of the downstream companies. One such example could be, for an example, uh, you know, when somebody is manufacturing a product and it is uh, sending it to another company as raw material. So your product becomes raw material for another company to manufacture a product which goes to the end user. So that is the case when processing of sold product comes in handy. If you are producing an end product directly, right, at that point of time, processing of sold product is not applicable to you, right? Then there is the end of life treatment of sold product. That that could be from the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions of waste management companies, and it is only limited to activities that occur during the disposal and treatment of the mentioned sold products, not for the entire activity of the waste management company. Okay, so so people, while doing this, they might forget that they don't have to account for the entire company's emission, right? This is also something that people should ask questions when the waste management company, for an example, gives their emissions uh, to the reporting company, for an example, right? So if they should definitely question if it is just for those products the emissions are, or is it just for the entire company's emission, right? So we have seen certain examples like that earlier. So I don't need to go into the activity data. That's very clear in terms of scope 1 and scope 2, right? Uh, in case of use of sold product, this is where it gets a bit tricky. So this talks about the direct use phase emissions of sold product over their expected lifetime, right? So this includes scope 1 as well as scope 2 uh, because of the end user's use of the sold product. Now, the activity data can be in the form of, for an example, fuel and feedstock. It can be in the form of electricity use, or it can be in the form of direct GHG emissions during use of product. One such example is air conditioning. We all buy air conditioning. Air conditioning uses electricity, so there will be a lifetime electricity usage of that product. Let's say if the lifetime is 20 years, that during those 20 years, what is the amount of electricity being used? And what are the leakages related to the refrigerant that goes into the air conditioning unit? No? So that is how you account for use of sold products uh, in your GHG inventory. Thereafter, let's talk about fuel and energy related activities. This is a tricky one and a very comprehensive one. So there are these four categories. I'll touch base upon some of them to not confuse you. We've discussed one earlier when we said scope 2 electricity usage, the transmission and distribution losses because of that usage at the end user is considered over here. So all upstream emissions of energy consumed in transmission and distribution, including emissions from combustion, right? So this is something that is part of fuel and energy related activities, right? The second category that we have discussed earlier was the emissions of purchased fuels, right? We spoke about WTT, right? That is what is being spoken about over here. So all the fuel that you're utilizing in scope 1, for that, whatever emissions are there for refining, for transportation, all of them will come under fuel and energy related activities. There are other two categories. I'll not go into detail for both of them, but I'll cover quickly. So the generation of purchase electricity that is sold to end user, this category is only applicable uh, if you're doing JJ inventorization for a utility company, wherein they are themselves not producing the energy, but they are selling it, right? Um, so that's when this comes in handy. So the activity data over here, of course, are listed down over here. So in most cases, you just need to know the amount of fuel that is being utilized, or what is the amount of electricity that is being utilized by the end user or sold to this end user, for an example, right? So these are the various activity data that to be collected for fuel and energy related activities. Let's move on to waste generation and operation. Here, the minimum boundary is scope 1 and scope 2 emissions of waste management supplier that occurs during disposal or treatment of the outgoing waste, right? The activity data for treatment of a certain type of an amount of waste by the waste management company, right? So the type and quantity of fuel combustion, the types of gases, again, it's the same stuff with respect to scope 1 and scope 2 of the waste management company, only for the service that it has provided to you. That means waste processing of waste uh, for that limited quantity and type. So that's how it is considered in waste generation in operations. So we have covered all the categories of scope 3 emissions. We have covered what is the minimum boundary that it should cover. We have covered what are the activities which are part of it. We have covered what is the standard data that you should collect in order to account for or prepare a very good GHG inventory. So we've provided solution for part of the problem. Of course, there are many other things that you still have to do as part of the GHG inventory activity, but we have addressed at least few of them till now. Let's see other challenges in the case study. Let's look at um, how we categorize the activities, how we calculate the emissions, right? So let's look at that now. So the case study is a university in India. This is a this is a central university, in fact. The total area is 1,000 acres, about 750 employees, including the teaching staff, about 7,000 odd students, wherein roughly about 1,500 would reside within the I'm really sorry, about 6,000 odd students would reside within the institution uh, in the campus. I mean, number of department is 50 plus. There are 40 plus buildings, including administrative building, auditoriums, guest house, hostels, multiple canteens, and department buildings. Right. The scope here is we've got the limitation of calculating the GHG inventory of only the campuses that it owns and not the affiliated institutions, right? So there are about, I've said about 60 plus institutions which are affiliated to this university, and those are not considered within this scope. Now, let's talk about scope 1 and scope 2. First, we'll talk about applicability. So, while all of them can be applicable, based on the activities that the university does, only these are applicable as of now. So, stationary combustion, you've got mobile sources, you've got refrigeration and air conditioning, fire suppression. There are no purchased gases reported as of now, and there's no steam which is bought in. So considering these, let's look at the scope 1 emissions. Now, in terms of stationary combustion, we've got the diesel consumption by backup generators. This was reported to be about 15,000 liters annually. Uh, to calculate the emissions related to stationary combustion by the generators, what we did is we took the the total quantity of fuel, we multiplied by the emission factor. Uh, we've got three emission factors, one for calculating the CO2, one for N2O, and one for CH4. Now you see 2.69 is the emission factor which is being used for calculating CO2. 0.18, 108311 is the emission factor which is used for N2O. Probably I'll use a pointer just for reference. And then we've got for CH4 we've got 0.021134. Please do note that one of them is in kg CO2 and the others are in grams of N2O and CH4, right? So the calculation for this is straightforward. You multiply with 2.69 and you divide with 1000 and you get 42.07 tons of CO2. That is the equivalent CO2 that is emitted. With respect to N2O and CH4, what you actually do is you multiply by the GWP, which is global warming potential, which is of course a multiplier of CO2, wherein you are able to calculate the equivalent CO2 for N2O and CH4, so that all of them are in one unit. Uh, you multiply, so you divide by 1000 at the end, and you get 0.44 tons of CO2 for the N2O, which is emitted, and 0.009 tons of CO2 for the CH4 that is emitted. So that's how you will calculate all the emissions wherever there is CO2, N2O, and CH4 emission factors available for the burning of that particular fuel. You will utilize that and you will club all of them together to calculate the total tons of CO2 equivalent. That is how companies report their emissions. Now, I'm not going to do this activity again. So this is only for one category. I've shown all three. I'm going to use tons of CO2 equivalent emission factor for calculating the emissions henceforth, right? So for mobile sources, we do have a question. Can we, okay. Um, we said that we'll take the question at the end, but I think um, let's do it now if that is something you want to do.
Hello, can I hear you? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, sir. Please go ahead. Your name is?
Actually, I just want out it is divided by 1000, but I think it is gram. So it will be 1000 into another 1000, 10 to the power 6 to be divided, gram to
That
kg
is
and kg to ton.
that is correct, sir. That is absolutely right. The
Yes.
final value is 0.44 tons of CO2 equivalent. You're absolutely right, sir. Please please look at the final values. These are the final ones. So why I'm really sure about this, because these are done through our systems, uh, and that is why we are very sure about the numbers. Shall we move ahead? Any questions? Okay. Similar activity in case of mobile sources, we've got kg CO2 per liter. That is the emission factor we are using. Now here, first of all, in case of mobile sources, we've got two types of activities. One is there are buses that run within the university, which are used both by students as well as faculties which are residing within the university. So whatever emissions are related to that is considered over here. So you've got the equivalent CO2 emissions, which is 33.83. We also have the passenger cars, which are owned by the institution. Uh, for that, the reported consumption was 670 liters of diesel. So the respective tons of CO2 is 1.81. Now, you can also get this data in the form of kilometers traveled, for an example, that is very sure in terms of passenger cars. You need to use the right emission factors for that, such that you're able to calculate this emission. Then we have got the refrigeration and air conditioning. Now, there was no new unit installed during this year, so there were no leakages because of that, but there were recharging of refrigerant. Mostly they were using R32, and about 45 kgs of R32 was fed back into different units. Uh, R32 has got a GWP of 677. The equivalent emission related to this is 30.47 tons of CO2. Thereafter, we've got fire suppression. Mostly they are using CO2 based uh, uh, CO2 based fire suppression. So those are 5 kgs each, which were refueled, and that is where the number is coming out to be 0.210 tons of CO2. So this gives you more clarity in what type of data you might get, what type of emission factors you need to collect. For an example, if you've got fuel consumption, you find the right emission factor for multiplying there. If you've got kilometers, for an example, at that point of time, you find the right emission factor to multiply with respect to emissions per kilometer, right? There were no purchase gases which were reported, but of course there could be some. Right now they're running a particular activity wherein they're evaluating whether different departments are utilizing some gases which might have global warming potential, right? Till now, they've not found anything. They are using argon and neon and others which do not have a GWP associated with them. Let's talk about scope 2 emissions. In case of scope 2 emissions, they've got grid electricity usage. So uh, they use about 72 lakh units of electricity from grid. For that, we are using India CA emission factor. The equivalent emission is 5203 tons of CO2. They also have electricity which is generated by the solar power plant which is installed on site. For that, they do not have any emissions. So no emissions are reported because of this. There's no steam purchase, so there's no emissions related to steam. Uh, these are all these scope 3 categories which are present in front of you. Now, 6 of these categories are not applicable to an institution. This can be generalized as well. In most cases, these will not be applicable, but the other categories will be applicable. So you've got downstream and upstream transportation and distribution, employee commuting, business travel, upstream leased asset is a possibility. Uh, Downstream is also a possibility, but you don't see it in most cases. You definitely will have capital goods, purchase goods and services, waste generated during operations. And lastly, if you are reporting anything in scope 1 and scope 2, you'll certainly have fuel and energy related activities. So that is a must. Since the university is not creating a product per se, so they will not have processing of sold products, end of life treatment of sold products, or the use of sold products. Currently, the university is not investing anything on, they're not reporting on franchisee as of now. Uh, let's look at all the categories. And now I know the time is very short. We've already run in 40 minutes into the presentation. I'll quickly run through and show you how these are calculated. I'll focus more on the activity rather than the emission factors. We'll share this with you. You can look at the emission factor being utilized. We'll also share the sources that has been utilized for the emission factors, right? So the reported activities in terms of business travel is air travel by the employees. So the resultant, and this is around 36,500 kilometers. That was the data that is reported. So the total emission related to this is 4.41 tons of CO2 equivalent. For employee commuting, they estimated this data. They didn't have the data. They knew what is the number of employees who are commuting by car, number of employees who are commuting by bus, number of employees who are commuting by bike. They calculated per day emissions for all of them, use the local emission factors which are provided by either India CEA or other organizations, transport department for an example, and they calculated the emissions related to each of these activities. So 116 employees by car, 172 employees by bus, 95 by bike. You can see the emission factors are different for each case. And in case of bus, of course, we've considered a bus with 40 occupancy, right? Which is why it has been divided by 40, which is the average capacity of bus. Quickly talking about one of these calculation just for reference. This is the total number of employees which are commuting, the average distance that they are commuting from. This is the emission factor per kilometer of um, uh, for the usage of car divided by 1000 because this emission factor is in kilograms CO2 equivalent and we are reporting in tons of CO2 equivalent, right? So these are the emissions right in front of you. Now, as you have seen that we are just talking about employee commuting, but there are students as well. Where do you think the student emissions would go in? Now, officially, GHG protocol has not mentioned student anywhere in the GHG protocol, but it is a good practice to account that under downstream transportation and distribution, which is what we've also done. Uh, what we have done is in case of downstream transportation and distribution, we've again looked at how many students are coming to the university by car, how many students are coming to university by bus, and how many university students are coming to the university by bike. Now, somebody might also say that there are students who are residing within the university and their transportation or their commuting is not considered, while it is already considered in scope 1 when we are talking about mobile combustion. The buses are reporting the total amount of fuel which is utilized, which can be for transportation of students, transportation of employees, or even visitors. So indirectly, that is already considered. So we don't need to do that again for the students which are residing within the university and might be using the buses which are going inside. So which is why we just are talking about those students which are coming from outside of the university. Let's talk about purchase goods and services and capital goods. We've got uh, so till now we've got this data that we have. There can be any number of data that is possible in terms of the services provided. Services provided could be numerous. These can be environmental due diligence, for an example. These could be housekeeping. These could be anything else. So there are a lot of services that are delivered to the university, a lot of goods which are purchased, but we've got this data and we are showing as an example. So in the reporting year, they use around 31,000 kilograms of paper, uh, mostly coming from the examination, and we've used this emission factor over here, which is 1339 kgs of CO2 per ton of paper, which is used by the reporting company. Comes out to be 41.61. There's also housekeeping services, which I mentioned earlier. So in case of housekeeping services, uh, the number was reported by the waste management company to the reporting company, and that includes both scope 1 and scope 2 emission of the company. So it is taken as it is, and they've ensured that this number is audited at the waste management company's end. For capital goods, the reported numbers are desktops. I'm really sorry, it shows 150, but it's actually 25 desktops which were bought in the reporting year. So the total comes out to be 14,900 tons of CO2. With respect to upstream leased asset, they've got a guest house which is leased out. Uh, we've got Gotham who's posed a question. I just saw that. You can unmute and ask your question, Gotham. Can somebody unmute Gotham?
Yes,
We've,
Himanshu, I already
Yeah,
unmuted.
yeah.
can you just move to the back slide next, the before slide?
Yes, sure.
Okay, we had the activity. Uh, you had mentioned 596 tons per
Per
desktop
desktop, yes,
purchased. This
yes.
data is gathered from taken from which
So
source?
there's a database called Borwitza database, which talks about the electronic items that you utilize. If you buy them, what is the embodied carbon associated with it?
Which database? Sorry, I'm not.
It's Borwitza. It's difficult to pronounce. It's Boavizta.
Okay, fine.
Right.
But we are not following the UK based standard, right? On GHG protocol, those emission factors won't be covered for this. Huh?
So you are free to use whatever emission factor database that suits you, right?
Some are
Uh,
using DEFRA.
Correct. I've actually not covered that point here in this case. We have covered that in our emission factor webinar. Feel free to look at it. But there are a lot of emission factor database that you can utilize uh, for this particular activity. This is the emission factor database which was available. There's no other database that is there. I think UK DEFRA does not address it. If there is other database available which are better, feel free to use it.
Okay, okay, fine. Thank you.
Right. We've got another question from Sankdeep. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, sir.
Please go ahead,
Uh,
sir. We'll quickly
Sir, actually,
address it.
my questions is already also the same like Gautam,
Sure.
and I would like to know that regarding that employee commuting part, what is the source of the carbon dioxide per kilometer? Where
This
you are getting that one?
so this is a study done by India, wherein there were two organizations who conducted this study, which was TERI and CII, and they collaborated with mostly the automobile companies, and they found out what is the emissions. So for commuting in terms of bike, car, as well as buses, they have these emissions there. So these are the emission factors which are utilized. This is India-based emission factors, sir. You can also use US EPA or UK DEFRA if that suits you, right? But it is always preferable to use local emission factors,
Thank you, sir.
right? Gautam, you have another question. We'll quickly cover it so that we can finish the presentation. We are already out of time.
Fine.
Uh, are you asking the question, Gautam?
No, we can proceed. Fine, I'm fine
Sure,
with it.
sure. Right. Thank you. Thanks a lot. So I think we've covered this already. We've got a guest house which is leased by the university, and for that only the electricity consumption is relevant, and that is what we have reported over here. We've used the India CA emission factor over here. We've got fuel and energy related activities. We've already seen that earlier. Now, all the emission related to stationary combustion, so everything related to whatever fuel we have burned in scope 1 goes over here. So stationary combustion, mobile combustion, as well as purchase electricity to, uh, transmission and distribution losses, all of that have been considered over here. Wherever possible, we've used local emission factors. If not, international emission factors, either from US EPA or UK DEFRA has been utilized for this. Lastly, we've got waste generation in operation. So we've got the reported ones are food waste from canteens, so about 1,53,000 kgs, so 153 tons. Um, so around 16.83. So you've used 0.11 kg CO2 per tons of the food waste which is reported. We've got uh, waste from plant residue, which is from dry leaves and twigs and etc. So reported value is 182,500, and we've got the respective emission over here is which is 25.55. So that is all the emissions that you have, all the categories that you have. We'll just quickly summarize all the emissions over here for you. You've got scope 1 emissions, which is almost about 108.85. We've got scope 2 emissions, which is 5203.84, primarily due to the purchase electricity, which is grid electricity and not the solar generated on site. And then we've got about 16,411 tons of CO2 reported in this particular year. I'm sorry, in that particular reporting year for the university. You can clearly see that scope 3 is the highest among all of them, right? So now I would want to, of course, go ahead and talk about what we can do next in terms of preparing a net zero inventory and talking about decarbonization and whatnot. But unfortunately, we don't have time right now for that. So what we'll quickly do is we'll talk about just building the reliable GHG inventory. Okay. We'll just talk about what are the ways we can do that. The first one is to have a supplier engagement strategy for scope 3 emissions. In most cases, what happens is you cannot cover 100% of your value chain. What you do is you pick and choose the top suppliers. I have seen that in cases there are 7 or 8 suppliers out of 20, 40, or 50 suppliers who cover almost about 80 or 90 to 90% of the value chain. So even if you cover them and you have got very good relationship with those 7, 8, 9, 10 suppliers, you can handle the data, right? So that gives you a lot of coverage. That's a very simple strategy to utilize. Now, another problem that we've seen is the stakeholder, in this case, the value chain, either they don't have the knowledge or they have the capacity gaps, right? So you take initiatives in terms of building supplier capacity, right? Assess them in GG accounting, the principles, do trainings on ESG, right? If there are language barriers, you share questionnaires which are in local languages. Of course, a little bit difficult for everyone to do, but in some cases it is possible, right? Provide guidance on primary and secondary data. Of course, there are multiple ways of calculating the emission we saw, what type of activity data to utilize. Uh, there are estimation that are possible. So why not do that and report on those categories rather than just skipping on those categories, right? Then improve data quality and methodological transparency. So we have to ensure consistency and clarity. You request for clear documentation of what is included, what is excluded from your suppliers. You ask for methodologies. If you're directly getting the total emissions, you ask for methodologies and activity data. And wherever possible, go into the granularity of the data itself. I've said this earlier, we can use proxies wherever needed, right? Those proxies should be justified, right? GHG protocol has got a clear section on proxies or primary and secondary data that can be collected to estimate the emissions for all the scope 3 categories. Lastly, managing data confidentiality and assurance challenges. Many times the suppliers or uh, uh, contractors would not share their data with you because they are worried that this will go into assurance. Also, this might be something that they don't trust you with. Some of these data will be proprietary, probably in terms of activity, in terms of emissions. So it's best if you do, confidentiality agreements, NDAs, have data protection protocols in place, have systems or use systems which have got very good data privacy, right? And the best way is to ask the supplier or contractor to have third party assurance at their end, such that they could share the data and the certificate along with it without even talking about what activities they've considered, such that you know that the data is right? So these are the ways that you can make sure that the inventory is really good, right? So, so these are some of the best practices. I'll probably quickly talk about what we do at Sustainium, and we'll open it up for questions. So whatever we have said, we we can help you with uh, from the tool that we have. We've got Sustainium tool, which helps you in carbon accounting and ESG reporting. You don't have to worry about data collection. You don't have to worry about emission factors. Many of those are covered in the tool itself. You create automated GHG reports, which are very well formatted. You've got dashboards. We've got scalability in terms of adding n number of sites and number of entities and whatnot, right? So a lot of value which is added through it. So I've spoken about all of them. We've got automated tracking across sites and suppliers, right? Easily we can collect data through surveys. We can do system integration. Um, we talk about custom reports which are ready for disclosure, right? We talk about the strategy and action. We've got sections where you can track your net zero strategy. You can talk about scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, as well as category level emissions and how much you've done till now, how much you have to do still. So those kind of information you get such that you can plan, you can strategize your decarbonization and reduce or achieve the net zero strategy, the net zero target that you've got. The tool that we've got is built to scale. It is built both for consultants and enterprise. It can handle n number of sites and entities. And in cases where you cannot do the data entry or you are not able to use the right categories, you've got challenges with respect to data validity, we can also help you in terms of data collection and putting it in the system and generating reports. So that's what we do. Um, we provide end-to-end ESG services. Uh, and this is quickly the snapshot that we've got. You can see the scope categories on the left-hand side, how the data gets entered. You can see the dashboards that we've got over here. You can see how to send an email to a supplier or a vendor by simply the click of a button, right? Here you can see how the data looks in terms of the type, the activity, the units, the data itself, and the total tons of CO2. So it's very good to visualize as well. So that's about us. Uh, why don't we move on to questions if there are any and address any challenges there? Yes, sir, please go ahead. Shankdeep. Yeah,
Yes, sir, I have one question. That regarding your software, so at present, so we are maintaining entire our GHG reporting in Excels and taking data from users department through SAP. So
okay.
whether the Sustainium has the capability to extract data from automatically from Excels and SAP, if we integrate the Excel is not a problem, but SAP integrations, whether it will be possible.
System integration is possible with us, sir. Probably we
Okay.
can connect later and I can help you out with that.
Okay. Okay.
You can also, if you can extract Excel sheets, you can directly upload it into our system. That is also possible. We've got templates where you can fill in and you can upload the data if you don't want to do the manual entry. And of course, I've already spoken about if you can send surveys, you know, in your value chain, that also sorts many of your problem, right? So Why don't we connect after this webinar, and I'll show you how that is done. Are there any other questions, sir? Do we have any questions in the Q&A section or in the chat?
No, Himanshu, not here. But I
Okay.
think Gautam before had some questions. If you don't mind, Gautam, you can. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, Gordon. Please go ahead.
You have a separate platform for this, right? It is more like an app or a software.
It's a SaaS-based platform, Gautam, which you can.
SaaS-based platform.
Yes, so
Okay.
you can use it via internet. You can also deploy on your local server. It can be installed over there, and you can utilize that. So whatever is your need, that can be clarified. So it's a web application, to be very honest.
You are based out
Quite
from
simply.
Bangalore?
We're based out of Pune,
Okay.
but Bangalore is not a problem for us, Gautam.
Okay. Thank you. That's it. Basically, you collect the data from Excel templates and you convert with those data, you are integrating it into your SaaS-based platform for reporting
Not
purpose, right?
not necessarily. We can directly take the data from where it is generated, right, and integrate into the system. What we are solving is we are solving the problem of data collection, right? Not every time you have to be, rely on Excel sheets. Through our system, you can automatically collect the data. Yes, Gautam, please go ahead.
Uh, with the mere with just entering the data, whether the data will generate our sustainability reports, or you have a separate platform for that.
We've got capabilities to produce JG reports as well as ESG reports. Right now, for example, BRSR, we
No,
can
it will
produce
be
BRSR.
integrated into this one platform, or
It's all integrated into one platform. Yes.
fine. Thank you. Thank you. That's it from my end.
Thank you, Gautam. Are there any more questions? If not, with your permission, I'll close this webinar. You've been a very patient audience. I think we've almost covered 1 hour. In fact, more than 1 hour, I believe. So thank you everyone for joining this webinar. In case you guys have any doubts regarding whatever I've presented, you can reach out to me at hello@sustainium.io. And you can also reach out to me at himanshu.prajapati@sustainium.io. So thank you for joining in. Feel free to visit our website as well. Right. Wonderful. Thank you.